Hey everyone, it's Robbie. Today I wanted to do a quick video for you guys talking about middle bets and when they have value and when they don't. And I obviously all middle bets, if you look at this right now, I'm showing you a dashboard of all negative percent opportunities. That's not very common. There's usually something where you can find a slight edge or at least, a very minimal or like a break even type scenario where it's at least 0%. So again, that would obviously be risk-free unless you hit that middle. I want to talk about a couple things that, if you're new to OddsJam or you're new to middling or things like that, things that I didn't really realize when I first started, but just as I've gone through it and kind of like logically been through it a couple of times, where there's value in things and where there's not, at least in terms of use of your sportsbook account and, the funds that you have in there, and just the likelihood of things happening. So I think the first thing is obviously you can see on this page, all these opportunities are a half point opportunity, right? So there's no way you would win both bets in all of these cases that you're looking at on this dashboard. You're either gonna win one and push one, or you're just gonna win one and lose the other. And win one and push one is only on that 1 point, and we're talking college basketball on a total of between, some of these are in the 130, some of these are in the 150s, 140s. I mean, you're talking a long shot to land on an exact number and that big of a range of outcome. Now, of course, we can expect that they're probably going to be between, let's say 30 points either way, majority of the time for a lot of these games. But even still, landing on a specific number out of a 60-point range, you have a less than 2% chance if you allocate it all equally. Now, if you have it right on the number, maybe it's a little bit higher if you think of a bell curve, but I'm not going to get into that level of detail with it. But I think one thing to watch out for. So if you feel like you have a good number, especially in maybe like a football game where the total is going to be a little bit lower, maybe a range of outcomes a little bit smaller. If you can get a half point middle, there's nothing wrong with it, especially if it's risk free, break even as far as like an ARB, or if you're generating a positive percentage from it. At the end of the day, I think it's important to prioritize number one, numbers that are common. So if you're talking football, key numbers 3, 7, 10, things like that. The common numbers that you're going to see teams land on, as opposed to, again, if you have the option, as opposed to taking an 8 or a 5 or a 1 or something like that, where the team needs to win by that specific amount, take the number that's more common. Again, I think it's somewhat common sense, but it's something that I don't think you think about when you look at these kind of dashboards. So I think it's relevant. Another thing, if you look at all these opportunities, so the first thing listed is going to be the top one. If you're not familiar with the OddsJam layout, the bottom one is the second market listed. So in these cases, the plus 290 is over 146. The minus 300 is under 146 and a half. Now, think about that for a second. If you're talking half points, there's only one bet there's only one way that you can win, and that's by winning the one on the half line. So in these cases, the 154 and a half, the 146 and a half, and losing the one that's on the even number line, the whole number. So in these cases, right? So let's pull up this calculator for this one. Let's say we put a 100 on the plus 290 and 290, 250 on the minus 300. That would guarantee that we're going to break even or basically equate out to the most equal loss on either side. So no matter what happens in this situation, unless it hits 146, you're going to win 250. I'm actually going to up this to 300. I think it's just going to make the math a little bit cleaner for what I'm going to show you. So let's talk about the best case scenario here, right? Let's say that the middle does hit and you hit that 146 number. What are you going to win? You're going to betting $402. You're going to come home with $100 in profit because the leg that's winning is the minus 300. So 300 to win 100. And this is going to push. And this is where you would make your money. So when you think about it like that, again, when you're looking at these half point lines, I would not waste your time unless you get a great number and you're able to put a ton down on it. But especially when you start thinking about like limits and all and what the sports books are going to do, if you start doing a lot of these things and betting kind of weird numbers and weird amounts and all spreads and things like that, excuse me, the one you want to win is the plus money, right? Because if this situation was reversed, let's pretend this is over 145.5, this is under 146, you would win, a little under $300 here. And this leg would push. So you see how that flips. So if you can, again, if you're going to bet these, if you're not getting the plus money side on the half line, I don't really think it's worth it. I think it ties up too much of your capital and you can probably find better opportunities elsewhere. Even taking a lower percentage, like, if you can get the -1%, maybe you don't go as heavy on it. But if that's what more correlates with a higher potential payout, especially if you can get a full point middle, that's great. And now that doesn't really apply as much if you're around like the -110 either way kind of situation. If you get a half point middle there, it doesn't really matter which side you hit, and that can be a bit more profitable. But it's just something to pay attention to if you're going to take these kinds of things. Not all middles are created equal, and I've talked about that a couple of times previously. It's just you have to think about range of outcomes. Now, I'll use a quick example. If you have two options for a middle, like this is the last bet that you're going to make, it's 12:58 on Sunday afternoon, and you're ready for the 1 o'clock games. If you have a middle on, let's say, Tom Brady's completions versus Tom Brady's passing yards, you have to think about range of outcomes, especially when you talk about, a week 18 game. But even a typical game, there's such a large range of outcomes on passing yards where, barring injury or barring some kind of crazy shootout, you can have a more reasonable range of outcomes on completions, as opposed to passing yards. To land on one or two specific yards is really difficult. To land on one or two completions is a bit more reasonable, especially because that's more than likely going to be within like that projected line, if that makes sense. So it's going to be the most likely result as far as like a bell curve, at least from what the sports books are expecting. So think about it that way. Tracking middles on yardage, especially in football, is very volatile and is very, very difficult to hit because, they can easily go past it on one play or never hit it in a game. They would never be on that number. Where for completions, if you have a one completion middle, he either never hits it or he has to hit that number to go over it, right? He can't get two completions on one play. So I think that's important to think about. And that's why I think middles in basketball are a lot more enticing than middles in football, because everything has a lower range of outcomes, even from a player props perspective. Points, rebounds, assists, points being the only exception of things that you can do multiple in one, right? So you can get a 2-point, 3-point, 4-point play, and that can jump you over a number. But if you have middle and rebounds, assists, or any other kind of market like that, they have to hit that number to exceed it. So I think it's just important to keep that in the back of your mind when you're determining what bets to make and what middles to play or arbs or things like that. And determining the range of outcome, the expected value of that. It's a little abstract to calculate, but I think just thinking about it logically, thinking about what can happen in a game and what's most likely to happen if a middle is to hit, I think that can help your strategies overall and help your profitability. Again, it's still difficult to hit a middle. It's not something that happens every day. You're not going to have a high hit rate on them, but when they do, they can really help you bankroll. So especially if you're just starting out and you're more into the risk-free stuff like arbing and middling and things, this is a important thing to add to your repertoire and to think through when you're making these bets. So that's all I'm going to touch on today. As always, you have any questions, comments, send me an email, leave something under the video. And I'd be happy to help with any questions you guys have. But thanks, guys, and I'll see you next time.